This is Roos Döll and Sienna, and in this oral we're analyzing one literary and one non-literary text in regard to the global issue of the causation of domestic, physical, and verbal abuse caused by men to women in the 1600s. The first text is an extract from Othello written by Shakespeare, more specifically Act 5, Scene 2, which will be contrasted and compared with the famous advertisement made by the Chicago Coal Sales Company. I, Rose, will be discussing the literary text Act 5, Scene 2, right after Othello confessed to Emilia that he killed his wife Desdemona. Emilia is confronting Othello about his unethical actions as she goes against societal standards of women in her marriage, when her husband is also present in the confrontation. Othello is a Shakespearean tragedy about main characters fighting the struggle of power between males and females, where Shakespeare illustrates toxic masculinity and how this initiates a domestic abuse. Then Sienna will be discussing the non-literary text, the advertisement made by the Coal Sales Company. This advertisement highlights the power dynamic in males and females in relationships and the justice behind males being able to abuse the power through harming their loved one. The company proves this point by advertising to the audience to hit their wives and read over an educational extract to know why hitting their wife is acceptable in society. The global issue of male domestic abuse to women is being compared and contrasted with an Othello extract, which is from the 1600s, and the company ad, which is created in the 1900s, to prove how domestic abuse is still present in the modern world. Starting off with Othello, the most apparent aspect of this extract is that it's a reflection of a couple dynamic during the 1600s society. This is revealed on lines 231. The use of a simile on line 232, "No, I will speak as liberal as the North," implies that women during the 1600s were not respected in regards to their own opinions or behavior, as Shakespeare compares the living conditions and women's rights in Cyprus compared to the living conditions and rights in the West. He does this by starting the simile with "no," which reveals to the audience that Emilia is disobeying her husband's order of not expressing her opinion on the topic, yet he also uses two powerful words, liberal and North. The word liberal displays that there is a willingness to respect or accept certain behaviors, but also being open to new ideas. Shakespeare cleverly put the word "no" in front of the word liberal to imply to the audience that wives in the 1600s were not respected in the aspect of relationship, which highlights that men verbally refrains women to perform the freedom of speech. To add on, the use of repetition and tricolon reflect how many things have more power than women had in the 1600s. This is shown on line 233. "Let heaven and men and devils, let them all cry in shame against me." Shakespeare successfully uses a tricolon to convey to the audience that heaven, men, and devils are above women, and performing such a rebellious act, which in this case is following against what your husband told his wife to do, would be considered a sin. An interesting factor to point out in line 233 is that men is used in a tricolon with biblical references such as heaven and devil. This implies that Shakespeare put an indirect negative connotation on men from the perspective of Emilia. This suggests that women understand that in society they have the least amount of power, and that men, the heavens and devils, have the right to abuse their power on them. Shakespeare further exhibits to the audience that women know that they have the least amount of power within society when he hyperbolizes the disobeyed act of not doing what your husband tells you to do from the wife's perspective through line 234. "Cry shame against me, yet I'll speak." This implies to the audience that Emilia still performs a frowned upon action by society, even though she knows that she would face consequences. Shakespeare reinforces this by foreshadowing the abuse Emilia will face later on in the scene, as Shakespeare used the word "yet," which creates suspense in the audience. Secondly, Shakespeare added an extra character in the scene to highlight a false illusion of gentry to juxtapose the power of men in the 1600s. This is shown on line 237. The use of adding an extra character confrontation that does not necessarily involve the extra character catches the audience's attention to the specific message that's being conveyed, which is the contrast of the acceptance of abusing your wife from a man or husband's perspective. Shakespeare exhibits this through the use of a rhetorical question on line 237, "Your sword upon a woman," after Iago draws his sword to intimidate Emilia when she defied his command. This line acts as an interruption in the confrontation to bring an awareness to the audience that even though during the whole dialogue, Emilia has been constantly verbally abused by her husband, yet Shakespeare adds a stereotype of not hurting a woman to show the norms of being a gentleman. This line juxtaposes society's acceptance of husbands or men abusing their wives through a stereotype. Not only that, but it reveals to the audience that the normality of violence or abuse in the couple dynamic in the 1600s, as Iago immediately draws his sword when he doesn't get his way. Thirdly, Emilia uses harsh diction to convey that women use satire to replenish lost dominance in the confrontation, which is shown on lines 238, 245, and 246. Emilia shifts her language to harsh diction. This is shown in a specific pattern. Whenever Emilia speaks during the confrontation, either the first or second line in her stanza reveals the increase of defiance in her speech. Shakespeare reveals this on lines 238 and 246, when Emilia states, "O thou dull Moor," and "O murderous coxcomb" to Othello. These two lines are examples of ineffective statements, as this harsh language is directly aimed and projected at a man, Othello. Shakespeare effectively presents to the audience that Emilia's harsh tone has rapidly shifted in the span of the confrontation, meaning she humorously uses these harsh statements to catch Othello's attention to what she has to say about the issue, which allows her power in the scene to be replenished. This is a clever way for Emilia to build her power in society, as she basically performs the same actions that men do, meaning verbally abusing people around you to seem to have a higher authority. The harsh language that Emilia uses might seem ironic to the audience, as women verbally abuse men in the 1600s, yet it actually conveys Emilia's conflicted mindset, as her ideas are presented in an irrational way, as she constantly repeats words like "oh," and her shift in punctuation from using exclamation marks to just simple declarative statements, which emphasizes her irrational way of speaking, which comes across as rambling to the audience. This is shown from the shift of line 245 to 246, when Emilia states, "By heaven, I do not, gentlemen." The line came after her husband Iago just verbally abused her by calling her a piece of filth and liar, shown on line 244. The repetition of the words "I do not" right after each other explains how she is trying to defend herself, but also Shakespeare is able to create a fearful mood by showing her rapid shift in thoughts, implying that the fearful mood is able to create an overwhelming tone that Emilia projects to the audience. This shows that the verbal abuse has an immense impact on women, as they're too overwhelmed when speaking, allowing her to lose track of thought and start rambling or projecting anything that comes to mind. It reveals the satire. Lastly, Emilia uses unruly actions to highlight how the unnatural behavior of women leads to an abuse of power in men. This is shown on line 236, 242, 243, and 245. Emilia competes against the societal standards of women or wives during the 1600s. Shakespeare effortlessly projects this only after Emilia gets verbally abused by her husband. For example, on line 230, Iago states, "Zounds, hold your peace." The angry tone that elevates his dominance and power in the scene allows the audience to understand that men are justified to talk in a rude and harsh manner to their loved one. Yet, Emilia performs unnatural behavior of women and directly tells her husband that she will not respect his wishes and instead does the opposite she tells her to do. This is shown when she states on line 236, "I will not." This is repeated over the whole conversation every time Iago insults her. Emilia goes against that. This pattern of structure allows tensions to rise by every single line, since every insult he calls her becomes more and more harmful. For example, in the beginning of the scene, he states, "Hold your peace." Then, right before Iago stabs his wife, he calls her a villainous whore, shown on line 243. The overwhelming mood that's being projected allows Iago to abuse his power in the relationship due to Emilia performing unruly actions that intensifies toxic masculinity and leads to abuse.
This advertisement is produced by the Chicago, Illinois Coal Sales Company. The date is unknown, but assuming by the context of the ad, there is a possibility that this ad was produced somewhat in the 1900s because of how the ad was made, meaning how the font looks more outdated compared to how most fonts are now, which is modern to appeal to our generation. Also, we notice that there are only two colors being used, and it is the basic black and white. This shows that using black and white brings out the simplicity of the issue of women abuse. Women abuse back in the old times was basic to men, and we could connect that using colors that are basic. And it all just sums up what the company wanted to do to promote the book. The outline of the ad starts with the bold words that catch the eye immediately, which are, "Do you still beat your wife?" By having this sentence as the eye-opener, it would gather the right audience. But as we notice, the words are as big as the picture. And this is important because by having a picture, the sentence explains it and forgets any other assumptions of the ad. Following this, there is a mini paragraph that explains how there is a book about why you should abuse your wife. This shows the significance of structure because when promoting a product, you want everything to be clear so people can make quick decisions on the spot. To dive in depth into the ad, we can see it as interesting because it shows how men would act towards women, or in more specific terms, women being abused by their husbands. The overview of the ad suggests that men who beat women were strong and dominant, but that women who were abused essentially should have deserved it. The way the text is shown, it would be towards commanding men who would most likely tell their wife what to do in order to benefit the man in any given situation. The tone and mood of the ad are very straightforward and direct. The Kohl Sales ad provides logos through the logic of what was normal when this ad came out, and it proves that the company knew how to pinpoint the words to relate to men specifically. The Kohl Sales advertisement uses parallelism in the words rollicking and provocative. Rollicking means amusing and fun. On the other hand, provocative means a strong reaction or anger, but it's mainly used in a negative way. And this connects to the idea of women abuse because having a word that means fun and negative at the same time represents what women abuse is. Because men would not have a problem abusing them, but others look at it as if he's beating her up. Since then, it was normal to scold your wife, but now it is frowned upon, but is still happening today. For example, produced by the Rocky Mountain Collagen, 1 in 4 women are victims of domestic abuse in the U.S. alone. Connecting this, women's abuse was happening in the old times, and this statistic is showing that it still happens after all these years. The abuse of women is tremendously controversial because men would think that it's okay to abuse your wife because she didn't do the right task, or she didn't give enough respect, or whatever the case is. But on the other hand, another perspective, they would say that it is never okay to use violence as an answer because it tends to make everything worse. Going back to the ad, the first line of the paragraph is, "Maybe you should never have stopped." This shows symbolism because this means that the man should have continued beating their wife and to always do so until they are essentially perfect. These lines in the ad sums up the global issue of women abuse well because men expect their women to be perfect since they have high standards. And when they don't meet those high standards, then consequences are issued. In conclusion, the Kohl Sales Company advertisement and Othello both showed various ideas on women's abuse in each text. In Othello, Shakespeare reflects a 1600 society because then it was looked down upon when a husband would lose his power to his wife, since it went against societal standards. In the advertisement, men would abuse their wives because they said it to become less dominant and to regain their position as husband, they tend to use violence. But both in Othello and the advertisement, they showed an angry tone because they showed different ways of women abuse. For example, in Othello, Shakespeare portrays a toxic masculinity, and in the ad, they portrayed the continuation of the abuse and how it appears to be a good thing. We can make a connection that from the 1600s to today, women abuse appears in many ways, and no matter how long history has told us what it is and why men abuse women, it is still happening.